Chapter 11. Dixie, Doxy, Lucy, Minnie, Sally, Meg and Shithead. Julienne ran her fingers through the pail of water, hoping its coolness would offer an escape from the stifling thick air. But alas, it too had grown warm. "I do hope Lucas doesn't get into any trouble with Austin." Sylvina made no comment, which confirmed Julienne's fears. "I'm opening the door." "No, you can't," Sylvina cautioned. "Well, where is Sterling?" Julienne got up, determination in her step, and headed for the door. "Sterling said not to," warned Sylvina. "It's already cooling down out there." "But we won't get any of the cool air through a closed door," Julienne argued, and flung it open, taking a deep breath of cool, fresh air. "Why shouldn't we have privileges? Why shouldn't we be able to breathe? We are innocent of any crime. We have done nothing wrong, and we are not criminals." She marched from the room, leaving Sylvina to scramble after her through the passageway, her pleas to turn back falling on deaf ears. Stepping on deck, they were engulfed in blindingly white light. Julienne blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to this new phenomenon. Once her eyes grew accustomed to the surroundings, she found all eyes upon them. She whispered to her friend, "Remember, Austin told them they were not to harm us in any way." Assessing the deck for an uninhabited area, she said, "Come on, we'll go over there." Sylvina rolled down her sleeves and wrapped her arms around her waist in an attempt to protect herself from the wind. "I'm cold. We should go back." Julienne agreed the air was quite chilly. Her body had become accustomed to the heat of the cabin. Still, the air was fresh and invigorating. Rubbing the goose flesh on her arms, Sylvina said, "I want to get a shawl. I'll be right back." She had retreated in the direction they had come before Julienne could protest. The men had gone back to their duties, sending only the occasional curious glances in Julienne's direction. The heat of the sun on her skin lifted her spirits despite the cool breeze. Under different circumstances, Julienne thought, this would have been very lovely. The ocean was a deep blue-black and held a world of its own. Plants and fish and coral and shells she had read. Amazing. Her lips tasted of salt and her cheeks stung from the heat of the sun, but she didn't mind. She rather enjoyed the new sensations. "May I ask why you are not in your cabin?" came that familiar voice tinted with sarcasm, yet not daring to speak over a low, bored tone so as not to agitate his pounding head. He couldn't believe she was the first thing he saw after stepping foot on deck. How was he to protect her if he didn't know where she was or what she was doing? "No." "Hasn't Sterling explained to you that you are to stay in your cabin until he comes for you?" "I needed air." He didn't want to deal with her defiance this morning. Why the bloody hell did she have to remind him at every turn that she was a born brat? He had enough on his mind without this annoying fact being shoved in his face at every turn. If his mind was not littered by the unwelcome, fanciful visions of her as an angel, it was being stuffed with the reality that she was truly the contrary. Ignoring him, she turned back to the rail, gripping it with both hands. She shouldn't be here, she would admit, but the idea of apologizing to him made her teeth itch. Perhaps they could come to a truce. She supposed she could swallow her pride and offer a simple apology, and put all this unpleasantness behind them. She inhaled deeply in preparation. "I have been tolerant," he began. "You have been what?" she asked incredulously. "Tolerant of a spoiled brat," she huffed. Apology withdrawn. "You call being granted the privilege of breathing a few precious breaths of cool air spoiled? The point is, you were not granted that privilege at all." She took a long, deep breath, anger building within her, a tongue lashing ready. He, on the other hand, rested back against the rail, rubbing his temple as if bored. Instead of unleashing her tirade, her attention was once again reluctantly drawn to his long black eyelashes. Stupid magnetic eyelashes. She had never seen such lashes on a man, perhaps even on a woman. They were perfect. She reflected that they were lashes like those of a child, long, dark, and silken. She had also just admired the length of another's lashes. Lucas! The promise she had made on the poor boy's behalf sprang to her attention. For Lucas's sake, she must be more agreeable. She mustn't anger the pirate. She had promised, and it shouldn't be that hard, considering he had the beautiful lashes of a child. She turned to him and smiled. Although unintentional, it was quite a seductive smile. She was horrified. Her eyes darted away, first to the deck, then to the sea, her face growing hot. What in the good Lord's name was that? Austen was taken off guard by this unexpected act, and by her stunning beauty. What in hellfire was that? Julienne felt her pulse pounding. She began to panic. He was way too close. Was he that close to her a minute ago? Or had he moved closer, taking whatever that smile was as an invitation? She could feel the heat radiating from his body. She shouldn't be able to feel his heat. He was looking away, and she took the opportunity to glance to where their arms almost touched. Her eyes slowly followed his arm, mesmerized by the curves of his muscles beneath his shirt, then onto those shining curls, brushing his collar and caressing his neck, and finally, his dashing profile. Her heart skipped a beat. She swiftly looked back at the water. She must get away from him. What was happening to her? She clasped her hands together to still their shaking. Jewel. His voice was deep and smooth, making her tingle as her name rolled off his tongue. She hesitantly met his gaze. A breeze caught and pushed her hair from her face as she looked up at him. She wondered if he had just called upon the wind to see her more clearly. She found herself wanting to touch him, just to reach out and fill her hand with his soft, thick curls. His face was expressionless, yet his eyes were teeming with emotion. Then his gaze suddenly shifted, and all emotions vanished. She followed the direction of his stare to see Sylvina heading towards them. "Here you are," she greeted, handing Julienne a small blanket she'd found in the cabin. She was relieved Austen wasn't angry, despite their refusal to follow his rules. "Thank you," Julienne said, taking the blanket. She hoped her shakiness was not too noticeable. "Hello, Captain Austen," Sylvina greeted. "It's certainly beautiful out here." "I've never been on a boat before." Austen smiled hesitantly, still wary of her red hair, and corrected, "A ship." Sylvina nodded. "Ship." They all stood uncomfortably. Sylvina again tried to break the silence. "When I was downstairs, I ran into—" "Below deck." "Yes, below deck." Sylvina glanced to Jewel, then continued. "I found Lucas, and he told me that he helps Poulet in the kitchen." "The galley." Sylvina turned on him. "Would you like to tell the story?" Julienne and Austen shared a grin. It was small, nothing monumental, but it was the first they'd shared while in each other's company aboard the ship. And they both found it a bit disconcerting, for smiling together was not part of their new relationship. Julienne smoothed her skirts, touched the rail and pushed back her hair in quick succession, not knowing what to do with her hands. Austen cleared his throat very loudly. Twice. "Forgive me," he finally said to Sylvina. "I was only trying to add to your education about the ways of a sailor." With a smile, she corrected, "Pirate." He acknowledged her answer with a smile and a nod, then added quickly so as not to dwell on the subject. "So, what of Poulet?" "Lucas thought you could let us help in the galley. It would be so much fun, and we could be doing something useful." Austen looked to Julienne. "Perfect. I will go inform Poulet of his new assistance. Don't leave this rail until I come back." Then, thinking better of the curt order, he added, "Please." Julienne acknowledged his attempt at civility with a smile. Once he was out of earshot, Julienne turned on Sylvina and scolded. "I don't know the first thing about cooking." Julienne could not resist admiring the width of his shoulders and bounce of his beautiful hair as Austen strode away. Stopping before retreating below deck, he glared at the crew, causing each man to throw an instant interest in his duty at hand. "Jule, just look at the colour of that water." Can you imagine how deep that is?" "Really? How deep is the ocean?" Julienne asked. "I have no idea. I thought you'd know, considering all your studies." "Yes, I'm starting to learn just how useless a lot of my learnings are in real life." There was a tugging at her sleeve, and she turned to find a dark-skinned man about her height, holding a large sheet of canvas that trailed across the deck behind him. Julienne looked at Sylvina before returning his smile. They stood there like that, just smiling at each other. "It's nice to meet you," Julienne ventured. He nodded enthusiastically, then pointed to the canvas and held up the large needle he had with him, nodding all the while. "Oh, you're the seamstress." Still nodding, he pointed to her mouth, then to his mouth, then made the motion of slitting his throat. Julienne saw Sylvina back up against the rail, horrified by this small, smiling man. The man tugged on Julienne's sleeve again, still smiling. She forced a smile. He again pointed to her mouth, his mouth, motioned slitting his throat, then threw his head back in silent laughter. "I'm the captive of a bunch of murdering pirates on a ship in the centre of a vast ocean awaiting my death by sharks. Or perhaps this little man is about to slit my throat," she concluded, then tilted her head back and laughed along with him. The little man left, apparently satisfied with her reaction. "That'd be Mantony," a voice said, causing her to jump. "Me name's Josh. 'Tis me pleasure to be meeting ye." Julienne managed to smile. "My name's Jule, and this is Sylvina." "Aye. Just thought I'd clarify. That is Mantony. He can't talk. That's what he was trying to tell ye." He pointed to her mouth, to his mouth, then a hand to his throat. "Can't speak a word." "Oh, I see," Julienne said, relieved. A rapid clicking sound from a large fish broke into their conversation. Julienne stood wide-eyed, watching the flying creature stand on its tail, dance backward treading water, and of all things holy on this earth, it laughed. She ignored it. "What were you saying?" But yet another one burst from the water, spraying cold water drops high above the deck. Small drops of water were still raining down long after it disappeared beneath the surface of the water. She thought that she was following too fast in the footsteps of her grandfather when she glanced at Sylvina. Sylvina's knuckles were white around the rail, and her mouth hung open in the most unladylike manner. For you, she was not the only one who'd seen them. "Happy lot, aren't they?" Josh asked. Julienne pointed out to the water and nodded. "Sharks?" "Dolphins," Josh corrected. "I found over the years that they are always there, ready to cheer you up when you need them." "Dolphins? They are very big fish." Josh chuckled. "Aye, suppose they are." "Do you see them often?" "Oh, sure. Sometimes they come in 6s and 8s, or even dozens. That's a sight to be seen. They can follow the ship for days." "Really?" "Yep. 'Tis a good sign, some say. Good luck." Julienne looked back at the two dolphins now arching from the water and diving back under alongside the ship. It laughed. Her voice was faint. "They do that," the old man answered. They all stood looking out at the sea in silence. "I tell you more about them, but don't know much more. I should, I suppose. Been sailing with them since I was 16. They're as much a part of my life as the crew if you be thinking about it." 16? Sylvina gawked. "That's so young." "Actually started my life at sea late. Sterling started at 10 when he was a cabin boy like Luke. Captain started at 7. His eyes dropped to the deck. lost in thought that hadn't surfaced in years. Julienne's stomach tightened involuntarily. 7 years old. He had only been a baby. Had he been captured? Had he been captured and forced to work on a pirate ship? Was this the only life he's ever known? Did you know him then? What was it like for him? Well, Capt was young, but he was tough. Had enough spirit in him to fill a man. Learned fast, too. Had to, I suppose. A smile brightened the life-worn face. First time he ever set sail, we met up with a rival ship. He wasn't scared. Not that brave little one. He grabbed a knife and fought along with the rest of us. What are you telling these girls? Austin asked light-heartedly, having heard nothing. Don't believe a word he says. He's full of tall tales. Poulet says he'll take you on right now, if you'd like. Poulet? Josh asked. Aye, the girls are going to help out in the galley. Girls? Girls? Julienne crossed her arms in front of her, insulted by his choice word. Good. 'Tis about time we had some good cooking on this ship. Come on, Jul, Sylvina said excitedly, taking her reluctant friend's arm and pulling her after Austin. Julienne would have enjoyed staying on deck a bit longer. As she followed behind him, Austin's strong presence made Julienne uncomfortably aware of him. His stupid curls were bouncing and swaying with pompous arrogance, and although she denied her eyes permission, of their own accord, they continually dropped to his bottom. How annoyingly extraordinary he was. But for the life of her, she couldn't figure out why. True, he was exceptionally handsome, but that wasn't enough to justify the word extraordinary. Yet every time she was near him, that word filled her world. He hadn't expected them to be so close as they walked through the dining area where some of the crew sat at rough wooden tables, and when they reached the door to the galley, he turned to them. Julienne stopped short, but Sylvina didn't, sending Julienne stumbling into Austin's arms. Her heart began to beat frantically as she stood frozen in his arms. Making no move to release her, she simply stared up at him with astonishment. He was so warm. Why was he always so warm? People weren't usually that warm. She didn't remember ever holding anyone that warm. Come on, he said softly with a smile. This is the kitchen. Keeping his arm about her waist, he showed them through the door. Poulet, these are your new assistants. This is Sylvina, and this, he said looking down at her, is Jule. Take good care of them. Did his thumb caress her waist before he walked away, or did she imagine it? Not being able to resist, she watched over her shoulder as he left them to their new job. Sylvina rolled up the sleeves of her shirt as she awaited instructions. Julienne was glancing around, unsure of what to do. She didn't for the life of her have any idea what the many bowls, pots, and instruments were used for. Suddenly, a chicken came fluttering in from a hidden room behind Poulet. Julienne backed away, startled. Ah, this is Moxie, Poulet told them. She is one of the best egg layers aboard. Julienne strained to see where the bird had come from. Poulet waved her over to show her the small room concealed by a half door. The room held hay, ramps, wood boxes, and around 7 live chickens. My, they live on the ship? Sure do. They give us fresh eggs to cook with. Julienne craned her neck to see them more closely. Poulet pointed to each one in turn. That there is Dixie, Dogsy, Lucy, Minnie, Sally, Meg, and Shithead. A large grin spread across Sylvina's face. I think I'm going to like it here.